Alrighty, everybody, we have a very interesting video today. It's so interesting that it's actually making the upload side of this channel before the Champions League reaction, which I think we're going to push back. We have a lot of interesting news coming out from FIFA today. They've announced two official announcements for the future of the World Cup, which obviously for me, it's the most prized tournament in the world, in my opinion. Any sport, the World Cup, it's the biggest deal. We just came off of a World Cup that, to me, had a lot of just different controversies, whether you want to go down the rabbit hole of politicalness, whether you want to go down the rabbit hole of how did we go there, whether you want to go down the rabbit hole of why did we just have a World Cup in the winter? There's a lot of questions still from the last World Cup. Now, all things considered, when we break down Qatar, I thought it was a great World Cup. I thought it turned out to be a very good one. Obviously, the results helped that. The knockout rounds were sensational, but I just felt like it ended up being a very good World Cup. Now, in order to run a World Cup in Qatar, they had to have it in the winter, and you're going to hear why. This is going to be interesting to hear what we're going to talk about today, because that's going to be the second announcement. The first announcement that we're going to be breaking down is that Spain and Portugal, okay, in Europe, and Morocco in Africa, and Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay are going to all be hosts for the 100th year of the World Cup, the 100-year anniversary of the World Cup. Since 1930, it's now 2030 for this one. Look, there's been a lot coming out about Gianni and accusations of corruption, and even the FIFA E club, not the FIFA E, the FIFA Club World Cup, which I think has a decent enough concept, and who got invited to it. There's been a lot of talk over the years. Who's now getting host nations? We look at the previous couple of World Cups. We look at Russia. We look at Brazil. We look at South Africa. I mean, they made sense. They made sense. And not only did they make sense, if we go back in the history of the FIFA World Cup and we just look at host nations, right? We look at, Germany, a great World Cup. South Korea, Japan, great World Cup, right? All these World Cup and the locations, right? The U.S., the France, the Italy, the Mexico, the Spain. You look at these World Cups and it makes sense. And where they're starting to lose me here a little bit, all right? And I understand the way that host bids work. I just don't like this. And I'm going to explain why I don't like this, because I'm putting myself in the shoes of a player, okay? Now, when you break this down, yeah, it's probably a little bit of a hyperbole to say, oh, it's 3 continents. Because if you look at the geography of this, Spain, Portugal, and Morocco, pretty close together, right? I mean, if you think about Russia when the World Cup was there and going from the left side to all the way to the right side of Russia, east to west, I mean, the travel time is probably way more. But then if you really start to think about it, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay. Now, those are all, pretty close together, as large as South America is, somewhat. But here's where I'm running into the question mark here. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this to the players? I mean, these players, as we know, are already overworked. Yes, they all are earning massive amounts of money and have insane contracts. But is this going to be good? I mean, are we going to run into scenarios where there's a lot of questions that we now have as the viewer? And that's where I'm like, FIFA's kind of losing me with these World Cups, the locations, the timings, because why are we changing what has been such a good process for so long? All right, as an American, I'm going to tell you guys this as well. I don't think the World Cup in 2026 is going to go well. All right, my country that I reside in, we are not well equipped to host a World Cup. Copa America was the worst tournament I have been to. I went to 2 matches. It was horrible. Everything about it, the organization, just everything. And if you watch the knockouts, what happened in the final, if you don't know about that, I mean, we had rants on this channel about it. It was a shit show. So I'm not feeling ultra optimistic even about 2026. Mexico, to me, makes more sense. The pitches are better. The grass pitches. I mean, I know they're bringing in, right, but it's not the same. It's not the natural. They're bringing in this rolled grass. They did it in Copa America. The pitches were horrendous because they're putting it over turf. It's not good. All right. So 2026, I'm already kind of really just nervous about that. We know as Americans, the rep we get about, enjoying this sport. As an American, to enjoy this sport, you already get placed in a certain category, right? So now you're going to have to host a World Cup, which the Copa America was horrible. And, we better hope that, maybe Canada and Mexico are able to subside some of the problems that we're going to end up having here. Okay, so now we go to 2030. All right, that's one World Cup upcoming. Okay, Qatar, for me, there was a lot of noise about it. We know the noise. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. It ends up being a good World Cup. Okay, great, right? But on the other side of it, the counter is that, was it a great World Cup at the expense of they had to rush those stadiums? There were many people that died to get those stadiums built. They really weren't prepared. It was really a money bid at the end of the day. As good of a World Cup as it was, people were really impacted in the action of building those stadiums, rushing the time, working in the summers for the winter, for the players to just go there for it to be playable in the winter. But how do you think those stadiums got built? They got built in the summer. So we look at this 2030, and that's going to get me to my next point, right? I just don't see this as beneficial for the players. And either way, even if a group is played in Spain, Portugal, Morocco, and a group is played in Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, to not stay in the same country, to not have that vibe that comes with the World Cup where a host nation hosts it. You know, it's Brazil, you feel the culture. South Africa, you feel the culture. Germany, you feel the culture. It's going to be all over the place. To me, that already seems off. And not to mention, if you have a scenario where in Group A, Team 1 has to go from Argentina, fly to Portugal, and then fly back to Paraguay for their 3 matches in their group, doesn't that seem all a bit unnecessary? That doesn't sound fun. That sounds way more stressful than it needs to be. But again, money talks with FIFA, and that's why this pisses me off, because as the viewer, I feel like we're not going to get the actual experience that you get when you do get one host nation, right? And I guess you could argue in 2026, maybe this is the future of it, right? Because we're going to have Mexico, US, and Canada. But still, to me, that is all still a little bit more of a similar feeling. I mean, you're going to go back, forth, across the pond a couple times just to play a couple matches. How is that going to work? Is that going to take a massive toll on the players? Is it going to feel different? All right. And then we move on. The one after that, it's going to be in Saudi Arabia. So now it's like everyone's asking these questions again. Is it going to be very similar to Qatar? Now, I've personally really enjoyed watching the Saudi League. Like, I think the progress they're making there, it's legit. Like, I know a lot of people like to just shit on it and say, like, oh, they're paying all these players. My other question here is, like, okay, now how's this going to work? Is this going to be another Winter World Cup? So is this now going to be the norm? We look at over the 100 years, right, of how this has gone, as I just showed you on the Wikipedia page, right? Now, it's really starting to change. And is that on us? Are we neglecting the change, or are we as viewers of, the World Cup, are we just wanting this to stay with the beautiful and amazingness that it's had, specifically with the one host nation? Now are we going to, okay, we're going to accept that now we're going to do it in certain nations that are just too hot to play it in the summer? For me, it's nothing against Saudi Arabia, because look, the one in Qatar for me ended up being a great World Cup. But I'm just looking at it like, even growing up, I'm turning 27. All the World Cups that I've watched, going back to 2006, 2002, I probably watched it with my father, but I was too young to really, remember that to this day. Look, all of them for me, the beauty of watching a World Cup in the summer, that feeling, man, it really is a feeling. It's something special, and now we're gonna accept the winter. Now we're gonna play the World Cup in 3 continents. So FIFA, to me, man, I mean, for me, they're selling out. They're selling out, and now they're going, even a step further here, where, is this good for the viewers? Is this good for the players? Is it good for the players to just do this World Cup, mid-season in the winter, right? Is that good? Because it's weird. That's why the beauty of it is in the summer. Usually the players get a little break from the club, rest a little bit at the end of the season, and go to the summer and play the World Cup. It's a player thing too. So we don't actually have any news. I've been looking around. We don't have any actual confirmed news on Saudi Arabia as 2034 being, is it in the summer or the winter? I think it's going to be in the winter. And like this comment here, Austin saying, I'm still stuck on the 2030 World Cup being spread across the world. Granted, it's just 2 regions, but the vibes are better to have all the games in a closer distance. Then again, Saudi Arabia sounds worse by comparison. So like, look, this is the problem with Saudi Arabia as well. It's going to be too hot to do in the summer. So I'm assuming it's going to be in the winter. And look, what he said, like, I agree with the first point. Is the vibe not going to be there? Is it not going to be there? There's an article written in ESPN today basically saying, as the only candidate to stage the 2034 Men's World Cup, Saudi Arabia will become the second Middle East nation to host the tournament after Qatar in 2022. And just as Qatar 2022 was shrouded in controversy from the moment the tiny Arabian Gulf state was confirmed as the host, the decision to take football's biggest event to Saudi Arabia has also raised questions. And I'm like, look, the point of this tournament is to not have all this over-the-top, unnecessary controversy, right? And as I said, is it political? Okay, is it like, why are we doing this in the winter? If we do these in the Middle East countries, it's going to have to be in the winter. And we're going to just have to accept that. Now this is what's happening. As I said, I think the Qatar World Cup was really good. Out of all these today, was I really against the Winter World Cup? Not necessarily. It was cool. I like it. I would do it again. But I still feel like a summer feeling is better. And overall, I feel like a World Cup in one location, man, or one area, just to feel that culture, to feel the vibe. For me, it's always going to be what the World Cup was about. We look at all the history of the World Cup. It's always going to be what the World Cup felt like and was all about. And now we look at the next 3, even the last one, right? From 2022, having that in the winter, and now we're gonna have, next 2 World Cups are gonna be, in multiple countries. Obviously, Mexico culture is gonna feel a lot different than the U.S. U.S. I think is gonna feel a lot different than Canada. Then we look at the other one, 2030. There's gonna be 6 nations for 1 World Cup. So I don't know, man. A lot of traveling for the players. What do you guys think, man? What do you guys think of this? What do you guys think of the announcements? Obviously, I guess of the next 3 World Cups, we'll see how it goes. I mean, Qatar definitely had its questions. I think in the end ended up being a lot better than everybody thought. The World Cup is the biggest stage of football. How do you guys feel about it, man? I don't know. I'm not over the top. I'm not over the top excited with this announcement or announcements today, personally. But let me know how you guys are feeling, and we'll see you guys in the video soon. Peace.